You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
We are letting you out on a kind of probation. Your aunt and I hope that you can conduct yourself normally.
What did they do in the clinic those 3 years? Did they cure you?
Yes. Now I'm completely mad.
Mais l'assassin est un type très violent. Il lui a fait éclater le crâne.
Les larmes.
And I'll do anything I can not to have you squander my sister's money. Leave your cousins alone, all 3 of them, please.
Il y en a un autre. Il mourra complètement.
Pour la dernière fois. Viens avec moi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids that you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
We are tackling some classic fuck them kids cinema, so please join the sleaze. It's going to be a good time.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing. We are in our 5th year of bonus episodes. There's like 100 plus, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have quite a few people make the jump this week. So let's give them their shout-outs here. We had Victoria. We had Charles Burns. We had Amanda Krupp. We had Michael Burke, Billy Jackson, Flower, Emmerka. Oh, God, you guys are killing me. Emeka Chiclair, Johnny Tiberio, Renier van der Zoo. That was butchered. You guys can all yell at me later. Robert Behrens, Sam Weinberg, Heath Jarvis, Miles Ramsdell-Ray, and Levy Weeb. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you are enjoying those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support. The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I see you right now listening on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the very bottom and give us a good old rating and review down there. Helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and find new listeners. And the very last plug, as always, is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local, based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that basically put on anything you can think of. And we got some freaks out there. Some people have bought some pens, some pillows, some posters, hoodies, shirts, anything you can think of. That link is in the description, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. And that's the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, and we would have been talking with special guest horror author Emma Berquist, where we went teenage monster movie mode. We talked about Ginger Snaps from the year 2000 by John Fawcett.
Awesome movie.
Awesome little werewolf Toronto movie that was very gruesome and very sad in terms of the character work and the idea. And it has a little bit of that Cronenberg body horror as sort of puberty and sexual awakening, and kind of mixing all those things together. We had a lot of fun talking about that with Emma, and she paired it with a film that we had never heard of called Waxwork from 1988, which was a film directed by the son of Andy Coates, and has the premise. It's not a particularly skilled in terms of how it was directed, but it has the premise of what if a wax museum was filled with historical characters and movie monsters from decades of history, and what if they all kind of hung out in one place and killed teenagers and ate their souls and stuff. So if you're interested at all in seeing the kid from Gremlins be in the same scene as Rosemary's Baby getting shotgunned in the face, that's the movie you're looking for.
Yeah, and he wrote it in like a 3-day binger where he was just partying the entire time. So
yes, it feels like that.
yeah, exactly.
So that was a lot of fun, and also featured a werewolf. So there was a neat little bridge there.
Brushed his shoulders off.
That's right. And then last week over on the Patreon feed for the listeners over there, we had your guys' patron voted episode, which I'm sure most of you know by now, but the patrons do vote on an episode, a double feature that we do once every 2 months. And you guys voted for Miller's Crossing, 1990. Joel and Ethan Coen. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that one. And but Nick Ferguson, our patron, had a really cool pairing with it. Devil in a Blue Dress from 1995, directed by Carl Franklin, starring Denzel Washington. Two very cool, stylish period noir films that featured some very crafty hustlers. And were really awesome recreations of their place and setting. Miller's Crossing is not really defined, but Devil in a Blue Dress, the recreation of South Central LA, and that is just amazing to look at. Both of them are amazing to look at. So we had a lot of fun talking about those last week over on, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, if that episode interests you at all. But moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us. He is one of the few actually good New York film critics. You might have read him in such publications as Film Comment, Sight and Sound, Art Forum, Village Voice. For me personally, his writing at Reverse Shot, I think, was some of the writing back in the long away days of 2014, 2015 film Twitter era that got me seriously into watching and thinking about movies. And he also now has a really excellent Substack you all can subscribe to called Employee Picks. And that is Nick Pinkerton. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I like the phrase, one of the few good New York critics, the implication being that other cities are just overflowing with superlative film critics.
Of course they are. You know this.
Thin on the vine here.
Nick, thanks so much for joining us here. And as it goes, we have the guests bring on their double features with them. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
Well, I'll be frank. It was like a very pragmatic thing. The two films are Alain Corneau's 1976 Police Python 357 and The Bell from Hell, or La Campana del Infierno, the second and final feature film of director Claudio Guerin, sometimes billed as Claudio Guerin Hill, who died on the final day of the shoot under somewhat controversial circumstances. And the film was then brought into harbor by Juan Antonio Bardem. In both cases, these are films that in some of my activity as an occasional hobbyist programmer that I've been looking at, Police Python 357 was the first film in a now monthly ongoing screening series that the American cinematographer Sean Price Williams and myself have been entrusted with programming at the Roxy Cinema Tribeca. A blindfolded screening series, meaning that nobody knows what they're getting until they're in their seats.
Amazing.
Cool.
And A Bell from Hell, I've been putting together a program of Spanish fantasy horror films, so-called Fantaterror films, that will eventually be running at Metrograph, I think, in the month of June. So, there was a sort of purely convenience-based pairing, but in getting ready to come on and blabber about them, I found that they did have a certain dialogue with one another, and the uniting factor is both can, I think, be related to what Colin McCabe, writing about Jean-Pierre Melville, called cinema of process, which is to say both are occasionally given to these long digressive sequences that involve us intensely in some kind of intricate detail work, the sort of laying out of a plan that is not, in some cases, really known to us. We see both protagonists becoming like very involved in some kind of. Sorry, I'm
I know what you're getting at. Like there's this thing where we learn a lot of what the characters are doing on a psychological basis by just watching them in action. There's lots of sequences where there's like not dramatic music playing, and we just kind of watch them do something, and it kind of piques your curiosity as you watch them. And over the course of the films, information is developed and stuff. But there is a cool kind of mundane element to you just sit there and you watch these people at work in a procedural way.
Yeah. This very documentary impulse almost, and then the Melville connection I think is rather more obvious in the case of Police Python 357.
Of course,
it's sort of policier, and it's right there in the opening sequence where you have a series of close-ups of this sort of workbench setup that the protagonist, Yves Montagn's Inspector Farreau, has in his bedroom, where he's greasing the cylinders on his 357 Magnum, scoring the tips of jacket casings on bullets to make them into dum-dum rounds. And this is how you enter the world of the film. In the case of A Bell from Hell, the protagonist, the French actor Renaud Verlet, playing Juan, probably his most notable appearance outside of genre fare being a supporting role in Visconti's The Damned. Anyway, this young man who's recently been released from a psychiatric clinic comes back to his family home, to his hometown and extended family, and in this very elaborate practical joker with a taste for the macabre. And we see the introductory scene of the character. He's making a plaster mask of his own face, and the utility of this mask does not become clear until
very patient with it.
Yeah. And moreover, there is a kind of extended set piece that takes up most of the latter half of the film, involving him inviting his aunt and three cousins over for some kind of meeting involving his inheritance and his relationship to the family, shall we say. And before this meeting, we see him going all throughout the house, putting these little caches of tape and rope around, and it's not entirely clear what the use of these items will be, though we've seen sufficient of this character up to this point to know it's probably something rather sinister. So, again, this was not a particularly thought through pairing, but to my pleasant surprise, there are some synchronicities, I think, here, in that, again, there is these sort of cinema process elements at work in both films.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that, these are two very underseen sort of foreign genre exercises that definitely have this really cool sort of detailed procedural element, but to two very different end goals of styles. You have one that's more of a gothic Euro horror revenge kind of story, and the other is, a noir story that's been updated for a more menacing kind of paranoid 70s sort of crime era. And it's also cool because this was, the 70s was a really cool transition period between, where genre cinema was in the late 60s and kind of where it was eventually going to be heading, because some of these do get to some pretty gruesome places. But I'm excited to jump into it here. So let's open up with Police Python 357. All right, we are talking Police Python 357, also known as, a little bit more pragmatically, The Case Against Farreau. It is the 1976 French crime thriller film written and directed, as Nick mentioned, by one Alain Corneau. Jamie and I are going to get to test our French-Canadian memory a little bit this week with some of the pronunciations. This film is it's going to be bad. It is named after obviously the very dirty hairy American style Colt Python Magnum caliber revolver that the main character Inspector Farrow uses here. And I was pleasantly surprised watching it because I didn't realize it until about halfway through the movie. This is like a loose remake or adaptation of Kenneth Fearing's The Big Clock, which was something I didn't know going into it, which I've seen, and it's a really great film.
Awesome.
In 1948, I mean, there's been a couple different adaptations, but the one from 1948 by John Farrow is the one that I've seen, and it's this very fun little cat and mouse murder mystery noir, lots of dramatic irony to it, imposing office architecture, and obviously you have God Charles Lawton in that film playing the boss character, and that one is centered more in a sort of publication network, which is sort of adapted from the original novel. So this actually moves the setting. The original novel is about an editor-in-chief of a publication who is framed by his boss for killing his mistress, and has to both head the investigation essentially for himself while actually not solving the case, because that would then reveal that he was behind it, even though he knows that he wasn't, revealing all kinds of sexual perversity and corruption and transactional business relationships that become more personal, deadly ones. It's got a little bit of the Hitchcockian suspense elements, but it's also got, some of the ideas, especially from the novel, of, mass communication companies and how they can be used to weaponized to manipulate images of the people who control them and have money. And it was very interesting because it was about halfway through the movie when I realized this is the same plot as that story. And then I went and looked up. I was like, okay, so this is the same thing, except for, this one has replicated that plot, but with more of a focus on this kind of, sort of romantic void that these hard men are trying to fill. This spends more time on the relationship that the two men have with the woman who then dies, and then who kind of sparks the thriller elements of the film that, some of the other films didn't quite have as much. And it updates the mass communication elements for more of this systemic police bureaucracy aspect and these kind of like cold-hearted, violent pragmatism of these cops. And also, while doing some of the cat and mouse elements, does them with two very specific actors I had a great time seeing, which is Yves Montand, who is from Wages of Fear and State of Siege, and Francois Perrier, who's from Le Samurai and Knights of Cabiria. And both are in Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Cercle Rouge, which is very funny that, he just was literally just like, so here's actors who have been regulars in Jean-Pierre Melville films. Let's put them both in this very specific story and, updated in this way, and, take some inspiration from the way that he shot crime cinema.
Yeah, in fact, the Montand connection to Corneau came by way of Costa Gavras, because Corneau had worked through the late 60s and early 70s principally as an assistant director, and he'd been on a couple of films with Costa Gavras and met Montand through those films.
Cool.
And yeah, you also have Simone Signoret, Montand's longtime partner, as the wife of his higher up at the Orleans police department, and Stefania.
Yeah, she's fantastic in Army of Shadows.
Yeah, who had been that same year seen in Novecento, 1900, the Bertolucci film, and also in Chabrol's Les Magiciens. So it's a nicely stacked little cast.
Yeah, a bunch of recognizable French actors here for sure. And this was a really interesting one because it for me, I found myself in the kind of early goings being surprised at kind of how much time it was taking on the elements that you were kind of referring to. Some of it was obviously really intriguing and engrossing stuff, like when it, just drops you into, this sort of this cop and his sort of procedural elements that you see him do, like as you were mentioning in the opening, how we're introduced to him literally just like actually putting his weaponry together and getting ready, and he almost lives in this hilariously stripped down like Bressonian.
It's a very like Melvillian kind of environment that he has made for himself. I mean, I first saw the movie in 2008 at Film Forum, which I think is the last time that it was projected in New York City. And, when we were sort of picking a first movie for our series, I brought it up, and the series is very idiotically called City Dudes, which is a funny band name that I made up 15 years ago, and which has amused me ever since. And I mentioned the title to Sean, and he's like, you know what? I was just thinking about Yves Montand. He's the ultimate city dude. As to what that means, I have no idea. But I'd seen it now 13 years ago, and I remember liking it a great deal at the time. Liking it so much, in fact, that my girlfriend at the time bought me a Spanish poster for the movie off of eBay and had it framed for me.
That's awesome.
So I've been walking past this poster for 13 odd years now. Then when it sort of came time to show, and we were sort of preparing introductory comments, like, you know what? I don't really fucking remember very much that happens in this movie. And as happens with so many films, they just get boiled down to a couple of idiosyncrasies or grace notes, or kind of standout scenes. And for me, it was in my memory, this is a movie about Yves Montand just sitting at a workbench and fiddling around with things. And I'm certain there are other things that occur in the course of the film, but that's kind of what's left to me. And that sort of austerity, I think, is what really got the hooks in me. And also just the sort of gravitas of Montand, who not only is sporting Harry Callahan's sidearm, but is wearing the same herringbone tweed blazer that Eastwood wears in the Dirty Harry films.
I also love when he goes out at night and he gets the leather jacket and the leather gloves and the jeans and everything, and his power stance when he's about to quick draw out of his revolver. It's really fantastic, physical performance that he gives. And it reminded me too, because we were just kind of talking about it, but I like when cop movies like this just have a more average looking old man as your character. It makes them feel kind of wearier. To me, it was a quality we just talked about that we really enjoyed about the Yakuza, which we covered pretty recently on this show. And not to say that Robert Mitchum isn't a striking looking person or anything, but having Robert Mitchum at that age in a role that probably would go to, a more, a younger guy who could do more physically. There was something so interesting about watching him at that stage in his life, dual wield shotguns and things like that. And there's a similar quality to this that, both of these guys are much older, old guard cops.
Well, it's also I think it makes Montand's performance particularly touching, as he is introduced very much as a man who is past the age of expectation, who is completely wedded to his job, and then had this strange meet cute with the Sandrelli character Sylvia, where she snaps a photo of him in the middle of busting some crooks who are
after hours
church, and then uses the image in a vitrine display in a shop window. But there are some very, very touching little pieces of finesse in the Montand performance. This middle-aged fellow who seems to have very much been out of the game with regards to love for quite a while, and is sort of bushwhacked by this unexpected relationship coming into his life. I particularly am moved by the moment when he sets up a rendezvous with Sandrelli's character at the Orleans train station, and there's a shot of him walking in where there's this sort of anxious, worried, but also boyish anticipation that flashes across his face, the desire to see this woman again, the fear that she will not be there, and that carries over, after Sandrelli's character is dispatched about a half an hour in, where it's not merely a mission of vengeance or a man trying to clear his good name, but also somebody who is really going through it, is in the claws of a deep and inconsolable grief. And, returning to the sort of process-oriented aspects of the film, I think you really see this in a scene where Montan has the idea that, his departed girlfriend was very fond of keeping very well-concealed secrets. He finds a little picture that she had nestled in a watch that she gave to him. So he breaks into her apartment and just absolutely, tears the place to pieces.
It's a great sequence.
Yeah. Shredding the mattress, peeling off wainscoting, just sort of going buck wild and finding all of these strange little mementos squirreled away. And it does, it owes something to that, Melvillian cinema process, but it's also like a really kind of wrenching scene of this, very broken guy who is trying to find, little keepsakes, little pieces of his, missing beloved. And I don't, granted it's been some time, but I can remember a few sequences in Melville where the process is sort of married to emotion in that way.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're spot on. That scene really stands out because, the way that Montan plays his character is there is this, especially when you watch him in action and his physicality, there's something very calm and kind of methodical about watching him at work and watching him do something like ripping the carpet out of her flat or stabbing the bed open, tearing the walls off. And after the fact, his partner is a really telling scene where his partner says, someone broke into the flat last night, came from the ceiling, and he said, you got to check it out. Like, you'll see it's a mess. Like, it's very clearly the work of a madman, the work of an insane murderer. And it's so interesting because, it's true if you look at it. Like, it looks like it was a very hysterical work of someone in pain and who was, trying to express that in a way. But the actual process of watching it, again, it's very mundane. It's very methodically done. And there is a cool, I think, merging of those two things happening here. One of my personal favorites is early on when we watch him and we get to know him pretty early on as a character who, he does nothing but the job. And that's why he's out at night after hours capturing criminals. And it's become a kind of problem that he's like an old man still behaving like a young rookie out and about. And people are always like, you got to be careful because, eventually someone's going to see what you do and you're not going to have a partner there with you and you're going to get into trouble. I think his partner even says you once again arrested two men alone. Like, they outnumber you in terms of testimony. So you gotta chill out a little bit. And then as this meet cute happens with Sylvia and he starts getting romantically involved with her, he does kind of see an escape for his time. And one of my favorite expressions of that is this really awesome target practice sequence that he does where he's quick drawing and he's clearly consumed by the work and he has a great power stance when he's firing his gun and he's putting in the work. You can tell that this is what his passion is, this sort of, again, this pragmatic mundane process of how he can achieve this goal. And then it cuts to him driving around France in this more kind of touristy, kind of beautiful, going around the locales, and he spots her on the street and he literally drives around the block 2 or 3 times just to catch a glimpse of her over and over again, which then transitions into scenes of them going on dates and, having steamy romantic sex in the French countryside in his car. And
which also leads to her going out with his gun and kind of getting in trouble with
shooting
a farmer on the land. And then that later on gets him into some trouble because he's investigating the case and he knows that he was actually the one in the field with her at the time when they start to question the farmer that comes in for information. So that was something I like too, that the power that he has as a cop does help him along the way with hiding the things he needs to hide throughout the case, but at the same time it keeps getting him into trouble as well. One of the things that I really enjoy is the degree to which, in a not too heavy-handed way, we are made aware of the fact that his diehard professionalism and obsession with his work
makes him not a terribly great partner, and how sort of certain reflexes or like the muscle memory of the job kind of creeps into his relationship. One of the scenes that comes to mind is he's in a argument with Sandrelli in a public park, and I forget precisely what the exchange is, but she says something to him that he takes amiss, and when he wheels around to face her, he does it in exactly the same kind of cat-like, firing range power stance that we've seen before. Similarly, on their last night together, he petitions to have them live together and is turned down, and he gives her this brisk slap across the face, which is just like a total, interrogation room slap. And that then, I think, heavily colors the grief that follows. It's like, this is the last time that he saw this woman alive, and he slapped her across the face. And how much deeper is that, sense of regret, sense of impotence in the face of death, with that memory laying over things.
Yeah, and I really like how that gesture kind of mirrors something that she tells to him, and extends to the kind of larger story at play, where she mentions to him, I'm fucking sick of cops. And that moment is obviously a very striking moment. And then it also applies for anyone who hasn't obviously seen it, or isn't familiar with The Big Clock, which is the story of this sort of character falls in love with the mistress of his boss. So in this case, the other character is Francois Perrier character, the Commissioner Genet, and Genet is having a affair with Sylvia, and Sylvia now having kind of become romantically involved with Farrow, is thinking about leaving him, but he doesn't know when she says that she's already having an affair with another cop who is also literally his immediate superior, who he answers to. And these two men don't, they're both having a completely separate relationship, and it kind of gets the wires get crossed. And we actually get some great POV images of, when that slap happens. It actually, there's this great shot from above where Genet, if he looked down, he could see that altercation taking place. But then she goes back up, and she's writing this note to leave him. And this note to leave him is very upsetting to him, but in a really intriguing way that it's written that I actually really liked, which is that he doesn't show that he's upset about it. He basically is just like, okay, you want to leave me? Okay, you want to go fuck another guy? Okay, you want me to pay for an apartment for you two to go and do that? Okay, that's fine. Whatever. I'm chill. I just want whatever's best for you. But she knows that that's not how he's feeling, because she knows that cops are, in her experience, very bad at actually expressing themselves when it's not through, as we see through both of these characters, through these more sort of physical, procedural oriented elements. And she basically goads him into actually expressing his real feelings, and baits him, which
he expresses by stoving in her skull with an ashtray.
Yes, which, by the way, another connection between these two films. There's two deaths or I guess the other one's not a death, it's a knockout. But regardless, two women in these films have their heads beaten with ashtrays. And yes, this is really, really horrifying.
End of the day, that's just what I look for in cinema. Seeing people get with ashtrays. And it's a very elaborate workaround for my dark fetish for ashtray play.
Oh no. You heard it here first, folks. But yeah, it's a really, visceral moment, and the moment where the film really does kind of change gears. All of a sudden, a lot of the kind of cross-cutting between the characters that we've seen, where you have Genet with his disabled wife and what his kind of day-to-day life looks like, and you have Farrow and what his day-to-day looks like, and how Sylvia has, sort of changed what both of them look like in ways that they feel is positive. And then all of a sudden that cross-cutting becomes incredibly dark and ominous, because it's no longer this thing where both of these people, there's a romantic entanglemeship is kind of what you think that cross-cutting is, and then instead it becomes these really dark cat and mouse kind of thriller sequencing that you might actually expect of this story. I think about like when Genet is deciding that he's going to leave and he goes to his car, and Farrow then at the same time that Farrow is entering the complex looking for her drunk, and he just, as he's opening the elevator, Genet has just turned the lights off and is just about to head down, and you can actually still hear his sharp footsteps as the elevator doors open up and he's about to go into her apartment and everything like that. And then when Genet is down below and he's looking up at the apartment, he can see the lights being turned on, and we even get this very Rear Window style telephone exchange between the two, where Genet goes to the payphone below and calls her apartment, and they just each heavily breathe into the phone, knowing of each other's presence. Like, this stuff is all really quiet and really tense and really well done.
Well, I should say also the cross-cutting in this sequence is, I think, indicative of a kind of particular morbid comic sensibility that Corneau has, where you're moving back and forth between this somewhat awful scene of a woman being beaten to death, and then you're going to Farrow, who, after the argument, goes on like a Pernod bender and
lets a bunch of pigs out for
this like weird, this like just like drunk act, like goofy stuff where Monton goes and lets a bunch of pigs out of a truck onto the street. This sort of strangely liberational gesture, and then on his way back to Sylvia's apartment, sort of takes several trash bins like they're track and field hurdles. And this sort of close proximity of the comic and the awful, I think it's something like very much present in what I believe is probably the best known Corneau film today, outside of France, Série Noire from 1979, which is also a movie that is sort of heavily inflected by American genre, hard-boiled literature, particularly being based as it is on a novel by Jim Thompson. But I think you really get the rather dark sense of humor that Corneau has in this particular cross-cutting exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, when the film changed gears here was when it really kind of peaked up for me, and the procedural elements started to take on what you were talking about, that more emotional quality to it. And even when some of the things that they were doing were kind of physically absurd in certain moments, like this does end on an insanely ridiculous and destructive finale, which I wasn't expecting because of the, how patient it is to finally let that out. But, this stuff in particular, and I mean, like, some of the more perverse elements to it are kind of funny. One of my favorite elements was how when Genet, he's killed his mistress and he's been weirdly kind of open with his wife, who is in a wheelchair, and when he comes home, she's like she's actually quite upfront about confronting him about the girls that he sleeps around with. And I think she even mentions like his secretary, and he was just like, I only had her once. Okay. Like whatever. It was done, one and done. That was it.
She's a true ride or die, I gotta say.
She is true ride or die, because this is what I'm saying, when he comes home and there's this great wide shot of him returning home and his wife is in bed in the sort of like dark blue room, and the orange light of the hall is kind of sleeking in from his trench coat and hat as he kind of slinks into the room and everything like that. And what I wasn't expecting was I expected the element to be that Farrow was going to be doing what he's doing, which is the cops are going to be seeking a murderer, and he happened to be in a relationship with the girl that was murdered, and last seen slapping her publicly in a park, and leaving all kinds of evidence like his boot prints and everything at the scene. So he has his own thing that he has to deal with. He has to investigate himself, but not actually let anyone know that, he's the one that they're all looking for. And I almost expected something similar, that Genet was going to have to hide this from his wife. No, immediately he goes, yeah, so the girl that you were joking about me sleeping with, she's dead. And I hit her. and I don't know what got into me. And her immediate response was, you heard that phrase so many times and you've never tried to understand it. And but immediately she's like, I am, she's right there with him.
No one saw you do it, so I admit.
Yeah. Either you were seen and it's all over for you, or you weren't. There's no point in admitting it right now. Let's just, wait and see where things kind of fall where they're going to fall.
Yeah.
And
I would be remiss not to mention, in talking about the film's peculiar sense of humor, one of my favorite bits, which comes up as Farrow is having to essentially investigate himself while keeping his colleagues oblivious to the fact that this is what he's doing. And at one point, he takes Sylvia on a date to the Musée Gustave Moreau in Paris, which is one of my favorite weird little museums, Moreau's former home, which is now just a shrine to his artistic output. And a report comes in from one of the museum docents, I think, of having sighted them together there. And I forget precisely the exchange, but one of his colleagues is like, oh, it's a strange place to go on a date. And Farrow can't help himself and just erupts. Maybe he just has good taste.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of great elements like that. One of my favorites is the boot print that they find, because they go, his partner goes, it's such a weird coincidence that me and Farrow just bought these same boots together at the same time because we thought these looked awesome. And yeah, it's like they're literally wearing what they think the killer was wearing. And then he immediately goes home and he's burning his shoes and he's burning his glove. There's actually a part too where he has to sit on his glove to avoid his partner seeing it in the car. There's a lot of again, this is where the procedural stuff really starts lending itself well to the actual tension and desperation of the text of the film.
Yeah,
because all of these
different
details
parts
are building up and he has to constantly be in a state of desperate improvisation all the time throughout the film. Constantly reacting to someone else found out something that he was doing in this one time that he wasn't really thinking, that he was just kind of going with the flow with this romantic, situation that he was in. And all of a sudden, all of those details matter more than any situation he's ever been in.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments is when they go to the market or the grocery store, and that one guy ends up following him in between the two trucks. So he hits him and knocks him out. And, he's going there at first, I believe, for just some groceries and things. And then once he's followed and knocks that guy out, the cops end up showing up. And he thinks that that's for, he has this image of him opening the front door and all these police cars coming towards him. And he's just like, oh, my God, this is it. I've been caught. I've been had. And it just turns out to be another procedural thing where he gets to be a cop again, investigate the scene. And now they're looking for a guy or eventually they find the guy that was knocked out, and then they're trying to find who knocked him out. And it just becomes this insanely crazy procedural thing that I love.
That sequence is really fantastic.
One of two sublime supermarket parking lot scenes in the film. It should be added. The other being, of course, the climactic gun battle in a Carrefour parking lot, where Farrow, having successfully evaded identification by throwing a bottle of acid in his own face, therefore not to be recognized by any of the witnesses who have come out of the woodwork, drives in like a bat out of hell to the standoff between three blue jumpsuited hoodlums who have been holding up an armored car in a parking lot, and rams his Peugeot into the armored car, squashing one of the bandits, and then rolls out and with some sort of fantastic.
He does 15 rolls.
Yeah, you seen Tokyo Drifter?
15 evasive rolls.
Exactly.
And it is very much out of the Dirty Harry playbook where, and Dave Kerr, I think, when writing about Sudden Impact, touched on this. That it's always the Apollonian Harry versus the Dionysian thugs. These guys with grease guns who are just spraying bullets everywhere, but without careful intent. And with 2 shells and a Peugeot Ram, Farrow manages to take these 3 guys out as they're like expending clip after clip after clip.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, that stuff is really, crazy that is kind of like the destructive finale, because he has gone back to what he does, which is the work at that point. But it's so crazy how long and how much time it takes for him to get back to that place, just to get out of the specifics of the situation that he's in. Because the one sequence that Jamie was talking about at the first grocery store, one of my favorite elements of that is that he goes in, he's just buying some stuff. He sees a guy who is a witness from a previous thing who recognizes him as the guy. And my favorite element of this is he completely plays it cool, that guy immediately drops his groceries and goes straight to the phone. And you just watch him observe him do that in action. And he knows that he's calling the cops on him. Yeah. And he doesn't, run him down or even tail him. What he does is he just very quietly checks out, and he pretends that he hasn't noticed and that he's just going on with his day, and actually basically baits the guy into leading him. So to actually following him out there. Right. And then he, in one fell karate chop, just knocks him the fuck out. And he does it just in time without even breaking a sweat, essentially.
And then
he gets
unceremoniously rolls him underneath a truck.
Yes.
Lest we forget.
Yes. Yeah,
and this is a police officer.
It's just so awesome, because we are set in the motion of the basic sort of antagonistic relationship that he is having with the rest of his department, which is that every bit of circumstantial evidence that they are going to find is going to point to him, because he was in the most public relationship with her leading up to her death. And then he has to find ways to sidestep it in the immediate moment, thrillingly, and again in these improvised ways, which is, I think, while pursuing obviously his own investigation of this other man, which he eventually does find out to be Gane. But I don't know about you, Jamie. I was quite surprised at how fast the Gane reveal happens for both characters, and then how fast it was over. I kind of loved that, because I expected that, it kind of left room for this final half hour to be really a lot darker and lonelier and sadder than I expected, because I honestly expected more of a thrilling, these 2 guys are going to chase each other down and try to fuck with each other.
Yeah, like a confrontation.
Yeah, but Gane actually, it's totally circumstantial too, where he just like sees the watch drop with the photo in her. He recognizes that as part of the jewelry collection that she tried to flush down the toilet right before that she was killed, that he had given her, that she had given to Farrow. And he goes, so that's the other guy that I've been looking for. And he was already kind of having a crisis with his wife, saying that, he suspects, he has that great instinct. He suspects that there's someone else. And despite the fact that the evidence isn't pointing there, not realizing that he suspects someone else because, the other option is he's the murderer, which he doesn't believe. Yeah. But I really love the fact that, Gane tries to do this ploy where he's just like, okay, I figured out that you're the guy. We know what's going on here. Why did you lie about this? I'm going to have to arrest you. I'm taking you in. He feigns going up to give his wife some medicine, and instead grabs a gun and grabs a tape recorder to get his confession that, he actually knew Sylvia, and comes down. And that sequence I thought was just awesome, where you can see it's a really great moment of Farrow having this, heartbreaking confession to someone that he kind of views as a, if not a friend, at least a very close colleague.
Yeah.
Where he explains, like, look, I just got swept up in love, and I'm in a crazy situation where I had no idea how to defend myself, that, I had no way, I was cornered. I have no way of knowing how to get out of this. And he thinks that he's telling it to someone who's sympathetic to him. But he also knows that Farrow has this Polaroid photo that he took and is proof of his relationship with Sylvia. And that moment where Farrow gets out of the car and he looks back and he's like, oh, I forgot my Polaroid. And like, this is proof that there's someone else who took a photo of her. And, and he looks back and Gane is just burning it. And he's like, why are you doing that? And he was like, I loved her. And that moment where it just immediately clicks into him, and instinctually he just pulls that gun out and just shoots him, and he's dead. Yeah. And there's still like 30 minutes left in the movie. And I was like, holy shit, like he just straight up killed his boss. And this was one of my favorite elements, because then it just becomes the process of Now, how does he prove that any of what he says just happened actually just happened? The only evidence just got burned right in front of his eyes. The only other person who knows, he just murdered.
Yeah.
And he has to take the confession tape and wipe down the car. And, you know, all of a sudden he's trying to cover up a second murder, an actual murder that he committed. And that, to me, I found really intriguing.
Yeah, and I love just all the scenes we've seen previously. Like we were discussing the one where he's arguing with Sylvia and he turns around almost like he has the gun. We saw him at the target range. We also see him in Sylvia's apartment where an alarm clock goes off and he instantly takes out his gun and shoots. Or I don't know if he shoots, but and so you see this kind of like instinct to just take it out, and he's got the skill to do it in the one shot as well. And yeah, exactly. And just figure it out later. So I just love the small scenes that we get of him showing that instinct and that impulse, really. And then it just, you know, it kind of shit hits the fan in that scene, because now he's completely on his own. Even though in a sense he always was, he could have at least used some information or used Gane in a way. And now he has nothing, you know? So it's, yeah, it's good.
Well, as I think Josh noted, like that last half hour is incredibly bleak and incredibly grim. And I've been writing about the movie. I've been writing about the movie, and one thing that sort of struck me is the fact that even after Gane has been dispatched, Farrow kind of continues doing all that he can in order to evade capture. And at this point,
including disfiguring himself by throwing acid in his face, like you mentioned, which is fucking insane, and sort of reminded me of the fact from the opening where it kind of looked like he was preparing his weaponry for the day, like scientifically, and then you actually see him getting lab needles and acid and throwing it in his face just so that when he eventually has to go into the witness interrogation situation where the guy that he karate chopped will have a chance to identify him, he doesn't look remotely the same that he used to. He does it just in time for that to happen and him not to be identified, which is a really great, you know, again, you don't know what it speaks to what you were talking about before, Nick, where you were like, we don't know why he's throwing acid in his face until like 10 minutes after he throws acid in his face. So there's something kind of bizarre and thrilling about just watching a character do something so violent and shocking like that. And then realizing, you know, psychologically that there is a plan and a purpose for it later.
Yeah, I thought he was setting it up for somebody else that was involved in the conspiracy or something like that.
I thought he was going to like inject the wife or something because she might be someone who also knew the truth. But no, totally not what he does. Yeah,
and it kind of plays a little to the beginning, like the intro scene, because I had the feeling when it started, because they have this ominous music that seems like it should be out of like Rosemary's Baby or Amityville
It comes
Horror
back
or
at
something
the end
like
too,
that.
really well.
Yeah, and you know, it's when he's prepping the weapons and he's putting his tool belt on and he's going out to catch the robbers at the that museum or whatever. But because of the music and there's no other audio but that, and his preparation, and you know, he's got all black clothes on, so he's ready to go out into the night. It seems like he's up to something wrong, and I just liked the kind of
ambiguity there.
Yeah, the ambiguity, and then how it connects to this scene later where we don't know why he's getting all of these chemicals together, and then he ends up doing something just completely bizarre and horrifying.
Well, the question it begs, the fact that this immediately follows his shooting of Gane, is like, why is this guy going on with the like pretext of maintaining his innocence? Like, why is he bothering, having had anything that makes life worth living taken away from him, having handed out his comeuppance to Gane? And it, I think, really lands in that final shootout and the immediate aftermath of the shootout when there's this police cordon far back from where the firing has been happening that Farrow is just charged heedlessly into. After he takes out these three guys, always methodical, he just starts stacking them up like cordwood, like dragging their bodies while everybody else is taking cover because these multiply perforated vehicles in the parking lot are exploding one after another. And you get one shot of Farrow head like half covered in gauze, what we can see of it horribly scarred, obviously pretty much determining that he will not have a robust romantic life in the future. And he turns, well, one of the cars is exploding, and we get two shots of Monton, where the explosion, it's this like large wave of impact that blows his hair back. You see like flaming pieces of debris flying by, and he has no reaction whatsoever. And, you know, he has, yes, gotten back to this place where he is a very efficient cop, but it is the least like validatory or like victorious climax that you could hope for, because you're just looking at a dead man right there. He can still, you know, he can still draw a gun. He can still, you know, get a guy dead to rights. So if need be, he can still take out some bandits in a parking lot. But this motherfucker is dead.
Yeah, no, it's completely on autopilot in his physical performance, and it's really fantastic because it mirrors, I thought, what was one of the saddest elements of the film before we wrap up here, which was just the wife of Ganet's character, because in many ways she kind of is actually meant to be more of his mirror image than Ganet was, in the sense that, you know, she immediately was very procedurally minded in protecting her husband, despite the fact that she knew that what her husband did was wrong. She immediately went, that doesn't matter. I am here to deal with the immediate fallout and consequences of what you've done, and I'm here to help you plan your way around that. And he eventually obviously gets killed by Farrow. And the aftermath for her element of this story I found actually incredibly upsetting, because you have Farrow throwing acid in his face and sitting there and watching, you know, the televised funeral of the commissioner, someone he previously thought of as a friend, and he kind of looks like in The Invisible Man, his getup in these scenes, which I thought was really entertaining. But I found this stuff just incredibly dark and interesting, because there's an incredible match cut from him in his apartment alone watching the televised funeral, cut to the same shot, but of the wife in her wheelchair sitting in the middle of an empty room, and you're wondering what she's doing until it cuts to the, you know, to the front so you can see her, and she is considering like blasting her face off with a gun, like right there in the middle, and just quietly doing that. And even like one of her helpers seems to like come in and look at her, and she pretends that that's not what she's doing, and she just has completely, because just like him, she has lost the thing that, you know, kind of would have made life worth living, kind of like as Nick pointed out, like that was just it. You
Which
know,
is
that
also
was
probably why she didn't want him to confess in the first place, just to keep him around, and you know, at the very least they could stay married and be together every day, even if every day they're worried about a murder charge coming.
Yeah, and there was something so interesting about both of these characters going through a monumental loss that, like, you know, created a void in their lives that they felt was, you know, unmanageable. And he chooses to double down on the work and just become more of a robotic killing machine than he previously was. And she decides that she wants to kill herself, but she can't do it. And I found it so, that scene where they meet up together and she says, look, I'm not going to tattle on you. I know that what he did was wrong. You know, like I think she even literally says, you've disfigured yourself for no reason, because I am not your enemy in this situation. Like, I am not going to be taking you down with the information that I have. I know my husband is the one who killed her. But I need your help to kill me. And everyone will think that it's a suicide. You know, no one will see what's going on here, even though, you know, his partner at this point has started to suspect him and is actually watching from the sidelines. And yeah, when she is like begging him to help her kill herself, essentially, and he actually takes the, you know, the gloved hand and grabs the gun for her and shoots her, and you get the, you know, crazy reaction from his partner, who was kind of watching it from the side. That stuff I just found really, really painful to watch, because here's a character going through the exact same experience as him, but just doesn't have that pragmatic ability to pull the trigger like he does. And so, you know, he even helps someone else kill themselves in a way that is supposed to be, you know, relieving for them. But, you know, that thought doesn't occur to him. Instead, we get this huge, explosive, destructive sequence where he is like, you know, his guilt has been kind of made manifest into these giant action gestures that he's about to take place in here as he retakes his place at his job. And then again, that ominous music kind of comes back in at the end as all we see is the flames and the sunset over this mundane parking lot.
Yeah,
so
they
really,
both ride off in an ambulance, and you don't really know. It's like either way, the guy's dead. Whether it be inside or physically, he's a dead man. So it's really sad and scary too. I mean, that music, I feel like, just brings such a horrific tone to everything on top of the sadness.
Yeah, the great Georges Delerue, perhaps best known for the score for Godard's Les Méprises, which is also used in Contempt. But yeah, this sort of haunted liturgical music that opens the film exactly to the point does give a sort of sinister air to proceedings. Should probably move on to Bell from Hell momentarily, but
yes,
since you mentioned the televised funeral, my last word on Police Python 357 is there's also a fantastic bit where Farrow, I think as he is screwing his courage to the sticking point in order to prepare to throw acid in his face, is watching television alone, and he's just watching this like footage of a insect devouring a fruit with no narration whatsoever. And something about that, and perhaps this is why this movie stuck in my craw for so long. It's like that's so sad, but also kind of desirous. Just being alone, contemplating self-mutilation while watching some nature documentary.
That's just existing.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Let's enter a reductive rating round on this, which for you, Nick, is where we remove all the words and all the nuance and give the movie a rating between 1 and 5. But it's also become kind of like final statements and sort of any lines or scenes we maybe didn't touch on while we were there. But I'm gonna go through this one a little bit fast. I think for me, this was a solid 4 for me. I definitely was really taken to, especially being able to, having already seen The Big Clock and being able to see what it was trying to do differently with kind of things that it chose to focus on. I really liked that, it kept the cat and mouse sort of suspense thriller elements, but played them really only for about 30 or 40 minutes of the film before, honing in on something a little bit lonelier about how these kind of unhappy and destructive men, they kind of found this bright, pretty young thing that came into their life as an idea of an escape from it. And instead they ended up kind of adding her to the wreckage. And you spend basically an hour just with the fallout of, that kind of happening. And the finale includes these really sudden deaths and self-disfigurements and suicide. And there's a lot of, blunt force, pragmatic sort of action and punishment about what's been left of the wake of this sort of shattered romance that I found really intriguing. And so I think that this was a really cool, sort of like French crime cinema update on this specific noir story. And I absolutely loved, some of the actual sort of design detail of it, the leather jackets and the gloves and the jeans and the revolvers and driving around the French locales and how methodically they spend the majority of this movie just like covering up murders or plotting and, in sort of desperate improvised thriller scenarios that they find themselves in. So all of that stuff for me was really fantastic. And it actually reminded me of one of my favorite Plesiotetski films, Confessions of a Police Captain by Damiano Damiani. Which is
high masterpiece.
That's an incredible film, and that one focuses a little bit more on the sort of political elements of a fundamentally broken system, but it definitely has shared something similar about characters realizing that they kind of have to manipulate and bend scenarios to their own will, but they have to do it violently, which has a lot of consequences to it. And I found that in relation to the romantic elements of this film and the feeling of loss that you have when characters are snuffed out as easily as they are in this world, I found that stuff really dark. So yeah, this was a 4 for me.
Yeah, 4 for me as well. I really thought that Montaigne was fantastic. He has to balance a lot of different emotions. I love the cat and mouse game he has to play with his own position. Like I was saying with that grocery store scene, him having to investigate the very thing that they called the cops on for when it's his problem. It's the thing that he committed, the crime that he committed. I just think is so fun and tense. And there's a lot of that, and it just keeps stacking. You know, the deeper he goes and the more people he involves himself with, it just gets more intriguing. And I really like that. And I've got to check out The Big Clock, because I just think that this kind of more power dynamic he has being a cop in this situation is very interesting. And I just like to see this same story, but maybe with a different position in life. I think that would be
done
cool.
in a magazine's editing office.
Just to see those differences, I think would be interesting. So, and yeah, I love the explosive finale. I think also the very slow, atmospheric, moody prep to that finale is very good. Just him looking like the Invisible Man, watching just the Discovery Channel, just slowly going mad because he's lost all the love in his life. It's really, really good stuff. And I think the ominous score in the beginning and end is very suiting for his character, and kind of the ambiguous nature of him just going off in an ambulance, but being a dead man either way, I think is very, very cool. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
Yeah, for you, Nick.
Oh man! Now, throughout my long and storied career, I've always really resisted giving any kind of numerical rating to anything. The lone exception to this being on occasional tweets where I will adopt the Video Hound Golden Movie Retriever or Receiver Guide system, which is scoring via bones. And
Okay.
That movie would be a woof.
Well, give us some bones.
I think I can choke back my distaste if I take on the Video Hound character persona. So I will give it 4 bones. It receives 4 bones.
Amazing.
4 bone
Love
film. And I will not go beyond that.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
No, awesome. Yeah, let's that will wrap it up, I think, here for Police Python 357. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about The Bell from Hell.
I don't trust you.
You can't be here. You can't.
All right, we are back, and we are talking The Bell from Hell, also known as La Campana del Inferno, as well as just Bell from Hell or A Bell from Hell. The translations on this one have been a little wild.
Heck of a bell.
But this is a 1973 Spanish-French horror film directed by Claudio Garin Hill. And yeah, you might have to give us some background on this one, Nick, because I couldn't find much about the history here. But so this guy really died by falling or possibly jumping from the bell tower in the film on the last day of shooting. Is that right?
That is correct, and it was
Insane.
then brought to completion by Juan Antonio Bardem, father of Javier.
Was it a suicide or was it an accident?
Here's the thing: I think in all likelihood it was an accident. As the movie was introduced to me, it was introduced as a movie where the director killed himself on set, which, of course, being a morbid fellow, immediately piqued my curiosity. And doing what reading up was possible, it's unclear, but there doesn't seem to be a very compelling case for suicide. Nevertheless, having watched the film, this is just the work of a deeply, deeply sick and unhappy human being.
Oh yeah.
In spite of there being really no compelling evidence for the suicide theory, I choose to believe it is so. I print the legend, as they do in the West.
Yes.
Yeah, so this has a really interesting history where obviously this man completed production on the film, and it was completed in post by Javier's. Is it his father or his uncle? I can't remember. Who's the he's the Spanish.
Maybe it's
either way,
uncle.
He's the Spanish
if
filmmaker.
I'm wrong, take that out. Take that out because I cannot
he's the Spanish
have
filmmaker. Best. Are you looking it up?
In any way.
But he's the Spanish filmmaker.
God, I was wrong.
Oh no. But he's the Spanish filmmaker best known for his film Death of a Cyclist, which is about kind of like this bougie couple who have an affair, who basically commit a hit and run on a biker and leave him to die in order to cover up their affair, and the kind of sort of logistical, psychological toll that takes place after doing that. And so as a result, you have something that I think is in some ways a little bit amateurishly made, but is then overseen in the editing style in this very slow, kind of dreamlike, elliptical manner that I was really taken to, and follows this, again, sort of like this sort of procedurally based mystery about this either insane or possibly driven to insanity due to gaslighting young man who was forcefully committed to an asylum by his aunt and his cousins so that they could steal his dead mother's money or inheritance. And he essentially makes his way out of the asylum in order to play a series of disturbing and elaborate practical jokes as punishment for their treatment of him. But there is a lot of sort of ominous detail to this that you do wonder at a certain point if he is just going to seek full revenge and he's going to, go full slasher mode and actually kill his own family, which he also has a strangely incestuous relationship to that, kind of makes its way in the periphery of the film in certain moments. But I was immediately just taken by the really grim tone of this entire thing and how we spend so much time with this guy, slowly piecing together the history that led to this moment. But in the middle of this, he's in the middle of this process of getting his revenge as we're, getting those details. And the actual process of doing that is this very sort of gruesome, sort of gothic atmosphere that it has, as well as, a lot of these great. And now, was this shot in France or Spain? I couldn't quite tell because it's a co-production, right?
Spain. And
Spain,
as
okay.
the co-production element, and I mean, that's fairly typical for Spanish genre pictures of the period, but there's really not a lot of French presence outside of the leading man, Renaud Verlet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I thought the location work they did for this was just amazing. The fog
awesome.
and the mountains and, like the constant backdrop of this church that's being constructed and all of these detours to these really amazing, like either there's like the Gothic mansion that his family is living in, which almost has there's some Peeping Tom elements thrown in there of like playing the old films up while he's showing them where these kids kind of are today. There's an incredible sort of diverting sequence where he works for a day at the slaughterhouse that is just unbelievably
disgusting.
Horrifying.
Yeah. They're just doing
I'm a fellow. If you put a abattoir scene in your movie, I'm 100% on board. It's the Blood of the Beasts. It's not an abattoir exactly, but Jean Eustache's Le Cochon, talking of process-oriented films. Barbet Schroeder's La Maîtresse, Fassbender's In a Year of 13 Moons. You get into an abattoir in your movie, it's at least good.
Yeah. I just couldn't believe that, like right off the start, we're in the asylum and there's this kind of prison montage of him, making his way out. It's kind of like the opening of King of New York.
Like clay masks at first, like he's an artist. And it's like he's in his own studio. That's the first thing that I wrote down, just knowing nothing about the movie. I was just like, oh, okay, maybe he's an artist. He's in his studio. He's working on something. And then quickly he's talking to a police officer, getting all his belongings back.
Well, I mean,
tearing up photos.
Is he not an artist, in fact?
He is an artist in a way.
I shouldn't take that away from him. You're absolutely correct.
They're very elaborately constructed pranks. I'll give him credit on that. He's really thought through. Like
he does one where he has fake eyes that are set up to make him look like he's ripping his own eyeballs out, and I was like, that takes detail, that takes time. It was. I mean, it leads to a
kind
really
of prank you imagine
prank,
Fulci playing
even
on
more
his family,
where
he's just like tearing his own eyes out in front of everyone. They're screaming and fainting.
Yeah, Fulci he does a.
He's a bit like George Clooney is purported to be on set, just a merry prankster.
Yeah, Fulci like read his children like bedtime stories, and then right before he turned around, shut the lights off, and closed the door, he just did the rip my eyes balls out gag and went to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that the plot of this is a guy who has recently been let out of an asylum, perhaps too early, probably too early. They even say, you're out on probation. I hope you conduct yourself normally. And he just refuses to shake hands with the guy. He's like, fuck this shit. I'm on my mission. He literally burns his probation notice.
As soon as he gets out of the jail, not a moment is wasted.
And again, the basic plot elements are him returning to his family, who, it's very heavily implied, like kept him in there, used his own inheritance money, paying an exorbitant amount of money, and implied to be bribing the doctors to just, drive him insane and leave him in there and to get rid of him, essentially. And him coming back and punishing them through a series of practical jokes. And that almost sounds like a joke plot to a movie. And what's insane is that the tone of this completely sells it. Like, I was sitting here and I was reminded of things like other things we've covered on the show, like Mario Bava's Shock was something I thought about a little bit. The sort of childhood domestic countryside meets this surreal horror vibe. I thought a little bit of Fulci's Don't Torture a Duckling for the way it incorporates
100%,
the mountains and hills.
One of that like Bava's A Bay of Blood, Michele Suave, Della Morte, Della More, these sort of the hell of provincial life. Movies.
Some of the especially the architecture in the fog, but even some of the strange interactions reminded me a little bit of the bird from the crystal plumage.
Yep.
That was pretty cool to see. Yeah, there's like, especially though, the architecture in the fog sets a real atmosphere to this film. Like, every single shot has these old buildings or old statues, and like specifically, I love when the daughters are introduced, and they're introduced after he tells the guy that
as a
scary
prank
story.
One of my favorite parts.
Yeah, and they're coming up almost like the fog from John Carpenter, like these silhouetted zombies coming up, but they end up just being these sweet girls.
These are the daughters of the villainous aunt character played by Vivica Lindfors of Nick Ray's Run for Cover, among many other films. Maribel Martin, Nuria Gemino, and Christina von Blanc.
Yeah, that sequence is awesome because there's the guy, who's sitting there. I think his name is he's Pedro, right? He's the builder, Don Pedro. So he shows up to talk to the aunt. He's kind of like a business associate of the aunt. He immediately starts fucking with him. He's like, okay, so have you met my aunt? Because she's fucking crazy. And the camera dollies in and pushes as he explains how she's gone mad because her 3 daughters left to go fishing and they got lost in the fog and they never returned. And she makes tea anytime there is a foggy morning or whatever, in hopes that they will come back singing their songs that they sing. And then you just get this amazing wide shot where you through the doorway where you can see the pillars and everything of the fog and the silhouettes coming through the fog as they start singing the song. And it turns out that it's just, his cousins. It's literally just his cousins coming home. But the way that the camera has been trained to kind of ingest this ghost story that he's told, it totally freaks you out as well as an audience member and this guy as he just immediately runs away thinking that, he's literally found himself in this creepy gothic story just because of, the setup that this guy has given him. And it's really cool that the filmmaking kind of gets swept up in that as well.
If I remember rightly, it's not Don Pedro Alfredo Mayo, but one of his associates who is.
It could be.
Whose wife is played by Nicole Vesperini, who's the sort of ripe, neglected, early middle-aged neighbor who our protagonist has a real pining for.
And plays a really mean practical joke on her.
Very mean.
Oh my lord! I should mention also that the screenwriter of the film, Santiago Mansada, is also the screenwriter for Baba's Hatchet for the Honeymoon and Sergio Martina's All the Colors of the Dark. So the sort of shared giallo DNA is very real.
Yeah, that's immediately what I was actually both of these films, because the main thing that I thought in the previous one, obviously there's a lot of French history and actors and things that they were pulling from, but it was funny that the film it reminded me the most was a Polizio Tetsky, and then moving on to this, I was like, this has giallo just all over it, as well as a couple elements from like when it gets into the is he actually going to convert into a serial killer, I did find that push and pull kind of interesting, because you're not sure how much of this is the horror element is him with makeup pulling gore off, you're not sure if that is as far as he's going to take this, or if he really is going to go into the, it reminded me more of kind of like the 70s and 80s updates on serial killer movies, when the Peeping Toms and Psychos kind of became more of like your maniacs. There was a movie I thought about a lot actually called Don't Go in the House. I don't know if you've seen that one, Nick.
Yeah.
Where the guy has the exact same plan, where he's going to get all the women into this like sort of slaughterhouse basement that he set up. But his deal in that is that he's obsessed with fire because of some sort of childhood trauma about burning and abuse. And so he basically just burns the women alive with a flamethrower. And the makeup effects in that movie to pull that off are nuts. And he spends like half of the movie then talking with charred corpses and things like that. So that stuff is pretty, like I was wondering if this movie was going to go in that direction, but it does stick a lot longer in the more giallo stylization, the dream logic editing patterns and the soundscape and sort of.
Well, I should say also, and this is, I guess, pretty much implicit when you're talking about giallo, but there's a more than small dose of Psycho in it, in the sort of play with audience identification, the introduction of this character who at first seems a, very frightening loose cannon who like finishes his first day on the job at the abattoir, walking off of the job saying, I've learned everything I need to know.
What a line.
Sort of
especially after those chunky images.
Through carotid arteries and whatnot. But then, as in Hitchcock's film, you get this very perverse play with audience identification where we're being aligned with this very dubious individual. And this too could be maybe one linking element with Police Python 357. And it goes so far to the point where after he has taken his wheelchair-bound aunt, yet another link, their wheelchair movies, taking his wheelchair-bound aunt, Vivica
There's
Lynn,
a lot of connections we're finding after the fact here.
taking her out by the what does one call that? The like little hutches one has for bees.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
takes her out by the beekeeping setup, we'll call it.
Yeah,
like gently mists her face with I don't know what, and leaves
something
her
to attract the bees, you presume.
Yes, one presumes as much, and then goes back. And of his three cousins, one of them, the character played by Nuria Gemino, is very sweet and sympathetic and understanding towards him. And as he's coming back to the best of his knowledge, having murdered her mother, we get this like weird POV shot where we're walking onto the porch, and he eventually comes into frame. It's a really like strange and cool shot. The DP on the movie is Manuel Rojas, who also has some giallo credits under his belt.
I love that they don't cut away from the POV. It's her staring into the camera as if it's staring into his eyes, and then he kind of just comes in from the side and she transitions that into it, so it's all in one shot. And I thought that was very
really
very cool,
interesting.
Yeah, and I think it was like the POV seemed to be, especially after he just did what he did to the aunt. It seemed like he felt the closest with this cousin, so it's kind of like we're getting his perspective of that intimacy that he shares with her compared to everybody else, I guess.
And the aunt even has to say, will you please leave your cousins alone? One of them's getting married, stop trying to fuck your cousins, essentially is what she has to tell him. And he's just like, only one's getting married, there's still two more.
Because it starts right away. Like as soon as they come to
as soon as he's fidgeting with their hair and he's making out with them, I was like, this is a strange.
And
I haven't seen like psychosexual incestuous family dynamics on this show since we talked about Andy Milligan's Seeds.
Oh yeah. That's a dirty film. Oh,
yeah.
So
that was what I was thinking about, because it was strange. I've heard 15 minutes have been cut from the Spanish version of this movie. We had to watch the dubbed version. I'm not sure if the Spanish version is out there. I'm not sure if there would have been sort of like more made sense of that stuff, because it does
the
just
incest
kind of
and
like,
the rape. You mean?
Yeah, just kind of some of that detail that kind of arises where it kind of feels like
it feels more than just vengeance. It feels like there was something going on before that we don't really know about. And he's
because then he goes up to the other one where he's clearly had a sexual relationship with her for a while, and she's straight up just like she's waiting for him as he comes up, and then she's asking about where the mother is, and she's like, she's dead. And I do love that he's basically explaining to them while he's doing this, like why he's doing all of this, that he was like, the way that he was treated as a strange animal, and that the doctor like slowly destroyed him like a worm in his brain until there was nothing but dust and there was nothing to grow except for hatred. And he's like, all of this has happened before the movie has even started. So we're basically just seeing him enacting these feelings, and we've been completely aligned with them in ways that are, again, this is supposed to be a sort of righteous catharsis for him, but the experience of actually watching it is quite troubling. Even if he's right.
And that's the thing. Like, the aunt has a lot of moments where she comes up with excuses, but there is a moment in the film when he says, "I'll just leave and leave everything to you. Just give me my passport and it's all over." But she, without total control and knowing where he is, what he's doing, she feels responsible and wants that inheritance. So she just keeps him in this chaos.
And there's also this implied sickness of the kind of sort of bougie culture that he's a part of as well, because there's also this element where like all the guys who go to the local like hit club, like there's a whole sequence where they literally just find a young schoolgirl who's walking by them as they're going out hunting, and they here, look at this is a wild duck who's not afraid of hunters, and they literally like attempt to rape her. She has to like get onto a rowboat and stay there for hours until it's nighttime before the one guy who seems like he's the nice one says, "Come on, we won't hurt you. Like I'll protect you. We'll get you back in. And you're cold and there's a fire over here." And then he turns out to also basically be a rapist as well. So these are the people he's trying to get revenge on. They are overtly kind of bad people. I love the prank where he makes that guy, I think it's that guy,
hold his dick at the urinal,
hold his dick and shake his dick.
He's like trussed himself up as though he's been in traction after a motorcycle accident, chasing the top citizens away from this like adolescent girl who they're getting their grimy mitts all over, and then he rolls into what appears to be the sort of the central dining spot of the bourgeois leading citizens of the town. Rolls in with this fake traction truss, and gets one of these guys. There's like thick rim glasses. I believe this is the one who appears at the aunt's house, gets him to hold his dick at the urinal while this guy is sort of attempting desperately to make sure that nothing will be said about the incident in the woods yesterday. And then he just sort of shrugs off the plaster cast and like,
yeah, made you touch my dick.
Prank. Oh,
because that situation is, the reason that guy he even knows about it is because he's the one who drives in with the car and actually gets the girl out of there. And like this sort of like nighttime driving scene that briefly reminded me of like the Wake and Fright kangaroo hunting. Like it's only lit up by like the headlight spotlights essentially as he's like driving through trying to like run them over.
Oh yeah.
That was pretty cool. And yeah, there's just this element where like all of the detail we're seeing is he is trying to get revenge against some very bad people. And what's so interesting is about how in tone it still just feels very ugly because you're not quite sure what this guy is capable of. Like that's the way that slaughterhouse sequence sits in your mind and how gruesome that footage is of like the chunky blood leaking out and the skinning and the dragging and the breaking of bones and the dismembering and everything like that really sits in your mind as, this is something he is, he's learned enough. This is something that he is maybe thinking about doing to these people because he thinks that these people deserve this. And then some of them probably maybe do. The movie sets it up that maybe that they do. But instead, his entire plan, and as it's revealed, especially in the finale, is that, it really was to kind of more prove a point about how disgusting this world is, that it puts on this front of this natural beauty and this amazing sort of construction and architecture and these, all of his cousins and his aunt wearing these beautiful clothes and these guys who hang out at these high society sort of bars and things like that, like they're actually going out and trying to assault little girls, and so he's trying to, I guess, pull at the seams and reveal that to all of these people via his, again, very elaborately constructed
apropos of the aspects of social criticism, which are quite strong and which come through quite vividly in the grim fate of our protagonist. In preparing to go on here, I was browsing through IMDb user reviews, as is my want.
Oh, boy.
And there's a fantastic lead to one of the user reviews of this film, which was something to the effect of Claudio Guerin's Bell from Hell was produced under the during the period of General Francisco Franco's dictatorship. But Given its harsh critique of Spanish society, it's unlikely that Franco went to the director who died on the last day of the shoot's funeral. And I'm like, yeah, probably he didn't. I wasn't laboring under the impression that Franco went to Claudio Guerin's funeral. As regards the abattoir material, I would be remiss not to mention also the incredible menagerie of creatures that our protagonist keeps in his home. And this is one of the sort of absurd details that makes this film so dear to me. Is he comes out of this 2-year stint in the hospital to his mother's manorial estate that is, full of fish, birds, heaven knows what else. And, it's fantastic. I love the sort of twittering activity of these animals in the background in so many scenes. But it's also like, who's been fucking feeding these things for the last 2 years?
Yeah, I also love his the crow that he has next to his piano or harpsichord or whatever. As he's just ripping that piece that he makes too. I don't know if that's original for the film or what, but it does feel, especially with the harpsichord tone, it feels very just like a madman would write that thing. It's got a very chaotic feel to it, and it's very energetic and it has a pulse, like a real heavy rhythm to it. It's very strange that's his choice of song.
And I love that.
The composer is Adolfo Waltzman, who also treats us to mini renditions of Frere Jacques throughout. Yes. Part of the elaborate setup of the Bell's role in the film.
All of the Frere Jacques stuff is awesome, because there's one part where you think that people are singing it or if he's just hearing it, and there's one part where he's looking through a photo album of him and his cousins playing when they were kids and stuff like that, and at one point he gets so angry that he just slams the photo album shut and the Frere Jacques immediately just ends. So that there's something going on in his head with that at the moment. And there's great little moody montages like that. One of my favorites is when he's playing the tape back that they clearly used as evidence to lock him up, which makes him sound like the incestuous relationship that he was having with one of his cousins. They set it up that it was actually not consensual, even though we find out later that it was. And they use that to lock him up. And then you merge that with these, again, the sort of ominous fog and sort of like the wet forest that he hangs out in, where he has like a warlock friend who kind of becomes important later in the film.
I have to jump in briefly because I've been plowing through a great deal of Spanish fantaterror, and this is a recurring element that is really fascinated me, which is that you so often have like some like healer or seer or
so cool.
kind of mysterious magician who lives in the woods outside of town. I should mention Pedro Olia's very great The Unseen or Unseen's Woods, which also has this figure. It's kind of a staple of these films.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea, because like this was just like a I wasn't sure if this was like a cultural thing or if it was just a strange, another absurd detail they decided to put in here, because we're not sure about his mental state during a lot of these scenes.
This seems to be, for a Spanish audience of the 1970s, something you didn't even need to explain. So we all know the magician who lives outside of town.
Yeah, and he just, he's occasionally there to help you if you ask him for help nicely, kind of deal.
Even ends the film, at least image-wise, like him going into the dark forest and the tree as the Frere Jacques is playing, and
the kids are singing, the montage of the church tower being built.
Yeah,
it's a figure that would be equivalent to like a milkman in an American film of the 1940s.
Well, do you know what? If I saw a crime film where a milkman just showed up and started killing people, I would be like, that makes sense to me. I got that. But yeah, I just love the mood of it. I really do. I was really taken with, even in elements where I was confused and I don't know that everything added up on a character level while I was watching it, I was still just kind of confidently moved along by how well cut together this was, and how, again, there's a lot of really grim and sort of dark imagery that he comes up for a lot of this. I mean, like when he just starts like putting together that murder dungeon, and you get like the concrete and the steel and the shower heads and, the various medical objects and everything that he's setting up as he finally like has, as we've said through the various practical jokes that he has committed, like had his mother's face stung by bees so many times that she's like disfigured now. The one girl, he just like ties. What's that?
His aunt, not his mother.
His aunt is the one who gets disfigured that way. The girl next door is the one where he scares her unconscious and then puts a note on her suggesting that he assaulted her while she was sleeping, and then later goes, I didn't actually do that. I'm interested, but I didn't. Like it was great prank.
Gotcha.
And
I mean, there's such an odd balance of like malevolence and innocence in that Verlet performance.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's true, because he's always got this kind of like boyish smile on his face anytime he's reacting to anything. But then,
because it's implied he's been driven crazy since he was a child, right? Like when he comes back, there's a great cross-cutting sequence when he's attacking the cousins eventually, where it's actually there's footage of him like running away from the aunt, and the film footage that they're playing Peeping Tom style inside the Gothic mansion is him playing with his cousins when they were kids as well. So like you can tell that the way he envisions this is that he is playing a series of jokes on people who he is friendly with to kind of prove a point. And they even show it to you like as the footage of him as a kid and everything like that. But the gruesomeness and the, I guess, severity of those pranks starts getting upped. And like that image, which became the poster image, is very striking of the three cousins roped up by their arms naked as he strings them up, essentially like the cattle that he was cutting open and revealing their intestines and things like that. And there's these really sharp cuts to him kind of considering doing that to them, but then imagining it happening to the cows like he saw earlier, and he kind of can't go through with it because this is again meant to more scare them than it actually is to be physically done. But that's just it, is you're kind of left on that ambiguous ledge with his psychology at the same time, where you're kind of like, is he gonna do it? I don't know. It's pretty easy. He's got all the tools.
because it keeps ramping up, right? You think like, okay, well, not just like we've already said, the practical jokes themselves are pretty disgusting, but it hasn't gotten to the point where he's hanging them naked from a slaughterhouse pole, and he's got all the works of the weaponry laid out in front of them, like it's hostile or some shit. Like it in that moment, you just have to start thinking, okay, he's fully capable of this. Plus, we have the context of the slaughterhouse and him saying, "I've learned all I need to learn." So it's like, did you learn this to just get to the point of scaring them, or have you really learned to kill here? Really learned
and
to
the
show violence?
The creepy monologue he gets too, right? Where he's like, in death, what happens to skin and eyes and soft silky hair is that everything rots and disappears anyway. So like, I should just kill you and add you to the beautiful natural surroundings of our property. And he's like, your bodies are going to turn into sap, and the sap will rise into pine trees.
This is the moment when watching the film, I was like, yeah, this guy killed himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, those leaves are perhaps her fingers or her cheeks or her lips, and you'll always be facing the sea. And, meanwhile, we're seeing images of, like a cow's jaw being sliced off by a butcher knife.
Yeah, close up too, and just buckets of blood coming out. Like it's absolutely disgusting.
End of the day, as we've been finding these hidden affinities between these two films, I think what it boils down to is they're sort of aspirational lifestyle like things like
I watched this and I went, this guy looks like he's having a pleasant
as a
life.
man of the 1960s would watch like a James Bond movie and see all this gadgetry and his beautiful bevy of female companions. I can watch Police Python 357 or Bell from Hell and see either this like austere, Spartan chamber that Yves Montand occupies, or this like weird Baroque mansion squirming with all manner of flora and fauna with a harpsichord ready to go. And like, that's what I want. That's what I want so badly.
These are the films to learn how to woo a woman. Yeah, absolutely. And Pickup Artist 101 right here.
Yeah, this is like paging through an Esquire magazine for me.
And it leads to this really incredible climax, I thought, where he eventually is caught because he, all of the unpleasantness does actually kind of overwhelm him, and he runs back to his mother in the muddy aunt in the muddy sort of stormy night.
Yeah.
And he eventually gets caught by the sisters the cousins who escape, and also the guy who he has kind of humiliated and has dirt on, and that guy decides that they are going to entomb him in the church, in this new church that they are putting the bells in. This is
what we refer to as a cask of Amontillado treatment.
Okay.
The Edgar Allan Poe story.
Of course. Yes. No, I did think, because it's funny because a lot of the Italians were also doing a lot of very Poe inspired. So that was definitely where sort of like the Gothic elements kind of came into me. And I thought that it was really amazing because you get this, this idea of him being entombed, and they're literally like putting the stone, literally building him up behind the wall as they're talking to him, being like, when that first bell gets rung, you are going to hang. And then he says very ominously instead that he is going to have the last laugh. And he's eventually sealed behind it. And they open the church finally, and they're talking about, we live in these troubled times of wars and revolutions and civil disturbances and the wanton killing of innocents and all of this. And in this dark times, we need to hear God more than ever. And they ring the bell, and we know that ringing the bell means that he was killed, and the entire family was in there listening to it and watching this as the day. And they were going, finally,
they used him as a counterweight, right? Like in the
they used him as
system.
a counterweight. Exactly.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah.
This magnificent bit of the like choir boys struggling ring the bell and being incapable of doing so, where
just have four strong men do it.
That claque of leading citizens who we know to be secret or not so secret perverts and molesters emerge from the stalls and we'll take this from here, lads.
Let us call on God.
Yeah, and well, that's what's so great is about hearing about, when people will hear this bell, they know that the voice of God will be carrying to all distant places, and like that's what they're talking about, as we know what this bell is like literally physically doing.
Yeah,
and then
they don't show the body either, so just the look of like the boys pulling on it constantly, and then the four guys coming up and giving it just a little more juice to move the counterweight. It's just the thoughts are very dark when you watch it.
When I was a younger man, like so many people, and so many people starting to learn about cinema, you're always told that like subtlety was a virtue. As I've grown older, I like so much just the most like on the nose shit. Like
yes,
says a beautiful boy who is just driven into despair by a repressive society, having his neck snapped by a church bell, like
by the voice of God.
Yeah, the most like just dunderheaded plain.
That all of the local pedophiles have paid to get built.
Man, that's good.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Very over nuance of any kind.
Yeah. And the final scene is of him literally transcending this death and like appearing in the house again, with the crows.
He's a Christ character.
Yes, the resurrection.
He emerges from the tomb.
I love that creepy wax figure too. That just like
which is what payoff for that opening image where you're like, what the fuck was he doing there, making a mannequin of himself? And then the guy is totally convinced when he comes back that wow, this guy actually did not die. I could have sworn that we killed him, but instead here he is sitting there with his goddamn playing his fucking pipe organ song with his crows next to the fish tank, and he walks up to them and he's like, how did you get out? Like, you can't be here. This is crazy. And he's going insane. And he eventually axes him to death, where he finds out that it's a mannequin, and he splits the mannequin's like face open, and he finds out that the tape recording was just playing his voice, and he was driven into insanity. And he figures out sort of the irony of the situation, that the last laugh was driving this local, respected, well-off rapist into a form of hysterical madness, that he actually achieved what was done to him essentially as a form of punishment. And then the dude is then killed, strangled to death inside of a fish tank, Silent Partner style, which I thought was funny. It's the second movie we've covered on the show where someone is as far as I know, not decapitated though, so not quite the same.
Right.
But the black gloves and the recording stopping and the candles blowing out as this, this forest warlock figure walks into the foggy night to Frere Jacques. It is so insane and unhinged and somehow kind of genuinely haunting at the same time, especially in terms of, how we have found out that at that point it has been confirmed that he probably wasn't going to kill anyone, and that this was all, a long form way of just driving all of these people insane the same way that was done to him. And when you get that reveal, I think a lot more of the style choices start to kind of click in for you, that this is meant to feel surreal and like, what the fuck am I watching? And that.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to hit the bricks momentarily.
We could probably wrap it up anyway.
Before I do, when I was a teenager, there was a very popular song by the Long Beach band Sublime, whose frontman, Bradley Noel, I believe, had died prior to the band achieving enormous success. And in the music video, there's the most like corndog shit of all time, where you have like a cutaway to the video, of course, is shot around the missing frontman, but you have a cutaway to Bradley Noel just jamming up in the clouds. And what I'm envisaging right now is Claudio Guerin looking down, much like Bradley Noel in the Santeria music video, just smiling as we pay tribute to his towering masterpiece.
Hell yeah. Pivoting, I think, towards the reductive rating round on A Bell from Hell. This one, for me, it's going to get a little bit closer to like the very, very high 3 territory. I think I want to revisit this one again because I think the destination clarified a lot of things that I kind of found a little bit confusing while I was watching it in terms of some of the character elements. And I do wonder if also the missing 15 minutes from the Spanish cut, because we did have to watch a shortened and dubbed version where the character's not named Juan, he's named John.
Yeah, is that out there? Like
if any of our listeners know if that's out there, please send that to us, because I would love to watch that and wonder if that would clarify any kind of the confused, absurd elements. But some of it is definitely built into it. And that stuff I did take with. I think it develops in this really dreamlike elliptical manner that I was really taken to while you're watching a really absurd plot of, again, a dude who has broken or come out of an asylum and decides that he is going to drive his entire sick, perverted, disgusting family and town absolutely insane via elaborate pranks, essentially, including getting his aunt stung by bees until she's disfigured, making people think that his family is dead and that they're all ghosts, making a local rich pedophile shake the piss driplets off of his dick, pretends to, go Fulci mode and rip his eyes out. Like that is functionally what you are watching. And there is still an intensity to the direction and to the editing that actually makes this feel a lot scarier than that kind of, I think, sounds. It merges the slow burn, haunting, gothic Euro horror atmosphere with this really genuinely gruesome intensity and psychological subjectivity to it that again reminded me of closer to things like Peeping Tom, especially when he goes full out. He has like a House That Jack Built style dungeon that he decides he's going to string all of his naked cousins up into and stuff like that. Stuff is really menacing when you do get to it, and really disturbing because you're not sure how far he's willing to go. And then the ending does kind of clarify for you that even that was kind of intended a little bit, at least, to be a little bit of a practical joke. And again, really nice looking, foggy mountainside stone church kind of location work. And, there's some really solid, jarring kind of flow of a broken psyche to the way this has been cut together. And the very giallo Italian style hysterical ending I thought was really fantastic. The only thing for me I thought was a little bit unclear was how some of the incestuous and elements kind of fit into all of it. I thought that kind of went a little bit unaddressed, and I do wonder if that would be clarified on a longer cut of the film. But as is, again, all I was thinking about was absolute banger films watching this, like, Don't Torture a Duckling and Bava and, Seeds, and even that little bit of that House with the Laughing Windows that we covered on this show, Jamie, that like folk horror giallo by Pupi Avati. Oh, yeah. There's a lot to really love about the disparity of images here between the gruesome slaughter footage and the more elementals and natural kind of gothic elements. But really interesting film that I think I want to come back to.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you. I think it's a strong 3. I do really like the very bizarre and surreal elements of it. Him going between this kind of boyish innocence and just completely malicious prankster is very interesting and very entertaining. I love the Gothic architecture and the fog and just the general atmosphere. I do agree with you that some of the incest and rape stuff, I think, gets a little confusing just on a character level. I guess with the incest stuff, it makes more sense because I think that's what started him off going to the asylum. But there's a moment, I think, where he just outright sexually assaults one of the cousins, and she has a very strange reaction to it, and I wasn't quite sure what it all meant in that regard. But the general vibe of this film and generally what it's going for, I think is really fantastic. So yeah, it's a strong 3 for now, but I'm gonna definitely keep it and revisit it. So
yeah, for you, Nick,
I will.
How many bones?
How many
I guess
bones,
is a more
baby?
appropriate question.
I will say it ticks a lot of boxes. We've already discussed the abattoir element. Mm-hmm. If you die on set, that's a bone right there. Like, Howard Hawks' his brother, Kenneth, in a airplane collision. Antonio Pietrangeli, who was dashed against some boulders while swimming during a break-in shooting. The great Antonio Pietrangeli. I mean, I don't want to upset your system here, but this is a 5-bone film.
Oh, damn!
Nice.
Hell yeah! No, we love that. We love when people do that.
Yeah, especially with something just so bizarre like this. I absolutely love that.
And underseen. I mean, both of these films have like under 1,000 logs on Letterboxd. So I really hope listeners go out and try and hunt these down. And for anyone in our Discord, we have made the films available to you in there. So you have no excuses. Go back and check these out, because I'm very glad that Nick brought these. These were very, very strange genre films that honestly I hadn't even heard of, either of them, and I'm very glad to have. So pivoting towards the end here, thanks so much, Nick, for joining us. That was a Police Python 357 as well as The Bell from Hell, 1973. Nick, if you've got anything to plug while you're here, if you've got any screenings coming up or any writing coming up you want to tell people about, this is usually where we have people do that.
I am so glad you asked, because I was going to buffalo in pure self-promotional commercial horror mode.
No need here.
But on my wonderful Substack, you can read me reiterating most of the exact same observations that I've made here about Police Python 357. And sometime in either late May or the month of June, there should be a robust selection of Spanish fantasy horror films coming to the Metrograph Theater in New York City, New York, the United States of America. And
is A Bell from Hell going to be one of them, or is that one hard to find?
I dearly hope. Oh,
you're looking for it. Okay.
We're searching high and low.
That would be really cool.
Yeah. Other than that, I think that about covers it.
Awesome. Can definitely recommend
pertaining to what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I definitely recommend going over to Nick's Substack, and he's obviously on Twitter as well, always firing off takes, and a lot of the time he'll mention a film, and I'll watch that film and check it out later. So worth keeping up with Nick and what he's doing, especially if you are into films like these, because I wouldn't have seen them without him. So go check him out. For our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be remembering the classics, because every time we go underseen films, sometimes we like to talk about some big ones. And we have a Won't Someone Please Think of the Children double feature coming up of Night of the Hunter, as well as The Innocents. That's Charles Laughton and Jack Clayton. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about those. And then we are going to, and it's kind of set up, we're going kind of black and white photography mode, because it's set up for the guest episode in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to be back with friend of the pod, Perry, who has given us a pairing that only he would have come up with, or that we would let him do. Yes. Usually it's a Japanese film and some sort of horrifying animation film. This time we are taking a left turn, and we're going to be talking about The Cremator, as well as Bellatar's Reckmeister Harmonies. I did not know that Bellatar was going to be someone we talked about on the show. It's not really Grindhouse fare, but I am trusting Perry that double feature makes sense. And
for whatever it may be worth, Ure Hers is The Cremator, a towering chef-d'oeuvre. Like, if you've not watched it yet,
I have not watched it yet. He told us up front, he said, I'm mostly doing this because I want to make you both watch The Cremator, and I think you'll both love it. So I tend to trust him in that front as a filmmaker of really transgressive cinema. So
yeah,
I am very intrigued, and that's what you can expect on the main feed in 2 weeks' time. But that being said, I think we're going to let Nick get out of here. So thanks so much for listening, everyone, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.
Stay classy.